"You don't belong in this family anymore," my brother yelled as he pointed at me, and in that moment, everything I thought I knew about love and trust shattered. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Bryn Vale. I had just returned home after finishing college in another city, hoping to reconnect with my family and start fresh. I imagined hugs, laughter, and the kind of warmth only home can give. But instead, I was met with cold stares, silent tension, and Cade, my older brother, standing like a storm about to break. Cade had always been competitive, but I never expected him to turn that into outright hostility. That night, during dinner, he erupted. Every word was sharp, accusing me of selfishness, of trying to overshadow the family, of being ungrateful. My parents, Marlon and Veda, stayed silent, eyes down, as if avoiding choosing sides. I felt betrayed, crushed, and invisible all at once. I had imagined their support, but instead, I was standing in a room full of people who had suddenly become strangers. As I sat there, shock turned into something quieter, something stronger. I realized this wasn't the time to argue, to beg, or to cry. I needed to understand why Cade was attacking me, and more importantly, how I could protect myself. I would not let his jealousy or manipulation define me. That night, I started noticing things, the hidden arguments, the small lies, the financial decisions Cade made without anyone knowing. And in that moment, I decided I wouldn't just survive this betrayal. I would turn it into my power. Growing up, I always felt a special connection with my parents, Marlon and Veda. My earliest memories are filled with laughter in the kitchen, bedtime stories, and the feeling that home was a safe place where I mattered. My parents celebrated my small victories, from winning spelling bees to acing exams, always encouraging me to chase my dreams. Those moments shaped me, made me believe family meant unconditional support. But even then, I noticed Cade's mood around me often darkened when praise came my way. He was brilliant in his own way, athletic and charming, but there was always this quiet tension whenever I succeeded academically. At first, I dismissed it as sibling rivalry, the harmless teasing that most families experience. But as I got older, subtle signs emerged, his sarcastic comments disguised as jokes, the way he would roll his eyes when I spoke about my plans, or insist he was doing more than me despite evidence to the contrary. Our parents, unintentionally, seemed to feed into it. They often excused his outbursts, celebrated his achievements with more fanfare, or brushed off his criticisms of me. Nothing overt, nothing meant to hurt, but the favoritism, even if unconscious, carved cracks between us. I never realized how deep that shadow ran until adulthood, when Cade's resentment boiled over. Those childhood dynamics, jealousy masked as teasing, favoritism hidden behind pride, and my parents' inability to notice the tension, planted seeds I didn't see until years later. At the time, I thought love meant protection, but I was learning that it could also blind people to unfairness. It's strange how memories of warmth can feel like warnings in retrospect. Looking back, every smile, every cheer, every overlooked glance carried hints of the storm I was walking into. The night of the dinner felt ordinary at first, plates clinking, the aroma of roasted chicken, and the soft hum of background chatter. Then Cade's voice cut through everything, sharp and deliberate. He didn't wait for an argument or provocation. Instead, he launched into a tirade, pointing fingers as if I had committed a grave crime. "You think you can waltz in and take over everything we've built?" he spat. "All your talk about success, your fancy degree, it's selfish. You're only here to replace what's ours, to rewrite the family's history with your name on it." I froze, the fork trembling in my hand. My chest ached, not from hunger, but from disbelief. I had imagined disagreements, minor clashes even, but nothing like this. The words stung, sharper than any insult I had ever received. I searched my parents' eyes, hoping for intervention, for a quiet word that might calm him. But they sat there, silent and stiff, as if a storm was passing and they couldn't, or wouldn't, stop it. Cade circled me verbally, highlighting every small decision I had made since moving back, choosing a job he disapproved of, spending money on things he considered frivolous, even my way of speaking, which he called pretentious. Each accusation landed like a hammer, and with every swing, I felt smaller, more exposed. I wanted to defend myself, to scream, to cry, but the words lodged in my throat. The betrayal was suffocating, not just because of his cruelty, but because my family, the ones who should have shielded me, remained motionless. Their quiet complicity made his attack feel unstoppable. That night, I understood something vital: love and family loyalty were fragile, sometimes conditional. And if I didn't find strength within myself, I would remain powerless under Cade's shadow. After that night, I understood that confrontation would get me nowhere. Cade thrived on chaos, on making me look foolish, and any outburst from me would only fuel his aggression. So I made a decision: I would remain quiet, observe, and plan. Silence would be my shield, and patience, my weapon. I started keeping a careful record of everything: snide remarks, subtle manipulations, and moments when he twisted conversations to make me appear selfish. I even noted instances where he misrepresented facts to my parents, turning their trust into doubt against me. Each entry was a thread, and slowly, a pattern began to form. While collecting these details, I noticed inconsistencies in family finances. Bills that didn't add up, unexplained withdrawals, and debts no one mentioned. Cade had always insisted he was handling money responsibly, but I began to suspect otherwise. Small clues, late-night calls with unknown contacts, secretive discussions about investments, hinted at reckless spending and hidden deals that could jeopardize the family's stability. Every piece of evidence I gathered was a silent promise to myself: I would not allow him to undermine me or our family without consequences. I began mapping timelines, cross-referencing accounts, and making sure I had proof that could not be ignored. At first, it felt overwhelming, the weight of betrayal pressing down, but with each discovery, I felt more in control. The fear and anger from the confrontation transformed into quiet determination. I realized that knowledge, carefully recorded and understood, could become far more powerful than any shouting match. For the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was preparing. And I knew that when the moment came, I wouldn't just defend myself, I would reclaim the balance Cade had tried to destroy. As I continued observing, a chilling realization began to take shape. Cade wasn't just mean or jealous, he was actively undermining the family in ways I hadn't imagined. While reviewing shared accounts for personal clarity, I noticed irregularities: transfers that didn't match statements, withdrawals labeled vaguely, and insurance payments that had never reached their destination. Curiosity turned into quiet investigation. I traced records, cross-checked statements, and reviewed documents I had once ignored, thinking they were boring adult responsibilities. Each page confirmed my suspicions. Cade had been siphoning funds from our joint family trust, diverting money for his own purposes. Loans he claimed he had repaid were still outstanding, bills had been manipulated to make him appear responsible, and insurance policies, our safety net, were neglected. The weight of betrayal was compounded by a painful truth: my parents, well-meaning and trusting, had unknowingly enabled him. Their silence during dinner, their excuses for his behavior, and their tendency to overlook irregularities had given him freedom to act without consequence. It wasn't malicious on their part, just naivety, but the damage was real, and I could no longer ignore it. As I compiled evidence, the emotional impact was overwhelming. This was more than greed or jealousy, it was a deliberate attempt to rewrite trust, to exploit the family's faith in him. I realized that confronting him without proof would be futile. I had to be meticulous, deliberate, and patient. That night, I resolved not only to protect myself but also to safeguard the family's future. The betrayal ran deep, but the path forward was clear: gather undeniable evidence, expose deception, and reclaim what had been quietly stolen. Every careful note, every document copied, was a step toward justice, and toward taking control in a house that had once felt unsafe. A week after uncovering the financial irregularities, a family brunch offered the perfect opportunity. I didn't plan confrontation, loud accusations would have only played into Cade's hands. Instead, I chose subtlety, dropping small, factual comments that highlighted discrepancies without directly naming him. As conversation drifted toward household expenses, I mentioned a bill that had been paid twice and an insurance payment that hadn't been processed. I spoke casually, as if making an observation rather than a challenge. Cade's face tightened. His eyes darted, searching for a way to deflect. The shift was barely noticeable, but it was there. He was uncomfortable, caught off guard in a setting where he usually thrived. My parents, who had previously accepted his word without question, glanced between us, uncertainty flickering in their expressions. For the first time, they seemed to consider the possibility that Cade might not be entirely truthful. I could feel the quiet ripple of change in the room, a subtle but undeniable recognition that the narrative they had accepted for years might need revision. This small victory didn't change everything, but it marked a turning point. I realized I no longer had to be the one recoiling under his shadow. I was learning to move with precision, to plant seeds of doubt and let truth take root naturally. Each careful remark, each observation backed by evidence, became a weapon in a battle he didn't even know had begun. By the end of brunch, Cade's usual confidence had dimmed. I didn't celebrate aloud, but inside, a sense of control settled over me. I was no longer naive, no longer the passive target of his manipulations. I had begun to reclaim the balance in our family, one quiet, calculated step at a time. After realizing the extent of Cade's deception, I knew intuition alone wouldn't be enough. I needed expert guidance to protect myself and the family's assets. That's when I reached out to Clara Benton, a meticulous family attorney known for her discretion and sharp insight. Our first meeting was eye-opening. Clara reviewed the trust documents, highlighting clauses I hadn't understood before. She explained how Cade's actions could be challenged, how I could gain oversight of specific accounts, and how legal measures could prevent further misappropriation. What had felt like helplessness transformed into strategy. I could see a clear path. With the right steps, I could stop him from causing more damage. Clara advised documenting every transaction, creating timelines, and formally requesting transparency in all trust-related matters. It wasn't about revenge, it was about accountability. She emphasized that even small, precise actions could shift control without escalating conflict unnecessarily. Sitting in her office, I felt anger begin to dissolve, replaced by focus. The whirlwind of betrayal, humiliation, and anxiety that had clouded my mind started to clear. Each legal insight, each procedural step, gave me a sense of order I hadn't felt since Cade's confrontation. I realized determination could be more powerful than fury. The calm precision of a plan was far more effective than impulsive reaction. For the first time, I felt equipped not just to respond, but to lead, to safeguard what was rightfully mine and restore fairness to the family. Leaving Clara's office, I carried more than documents. I carried clarity and a quiet confidence. The storm that Cade had created no longer intimidated me. Instead, it challenged me to rise above, to act decisively, and to reclaim authority over the chaos he had sown. The family holiday was always a mix of tradition and tension, but this year, I approached it differently. I knew Cade thrived on distractions and emotional reactions, so I planned carefully. Every moment, every conversation, became part of a strategy to reveal truth without drama. As dinner progressed, I waited for the right opportunity. Cade casually mentioned a recent expense, trying to assert control, unaware that I had already gathered the receipts, statements, and account logs that exposed his mismanagement. Calmly, I presented the documents, not as accusations, but as undeniable facts. Each piece of evidence was methodically laid out, showing transfers, unpaid bills, and misleading claims he had made over the past months. The room fell silent. My parents glanced between us, a mixture of shock and dawning comprehension on their faces. Cade's usual composure crumbled. He fumbled for excuses, stammered through explanations, but every word he tried to weave was instantly contradicted by the proof in front of him. I spoke evenly, without raising my voice, letting the evidence speak louder than emotion. The careful calm in my delivery contrasted sharply with Cade's growing panic. I realized then that he had never expected me to be so prepared, so precise. His overconfidence had blinded him to the possibility that I could gather facts, anticipate his moves, and confront him strategically. By the time dessert was served, the balance in the room had shifted. Cade no longer dominated the conversation, his threats and bluster had lost their power. I wasn't just defending myself, I had forced him into a position where he could no longer manipulate without exposure. The confrontation had turned into a quiet but decisive war, one I could win through evidence, patience, and unwavering resolve. After I laid out the documents, Cade attempted a familiar tactic, minimizing the situation. "You're blowing this out of proportion," he said, voice dripping with false concern. "Everything you're seeing is just a misunderstanding. You're overreacting." His words, meant to confuse and intimidate, no longer carried weight. I calmly countered each claim with precise records, dates, amounts, and copies of correspondences he had tried to hide. Each line I presented dismantled his version of reality piece by piece. My parents, who had mostly stayed silent during past disputes, began to pay attention. They leaned in, reading the figures, connecting dots that had always been obscured by Cade's charm and deception. Their eyes widened as they realized the depth of what had been occurring behind their backs. The realization was painful but necessary. Cade's face flushed. He faltered, stammering through feeble denials, unable to maintain the facade that had previously kept him untouchable. His usual confidence vanished, replaced by visible panic. He realized too late that underestimating me had been a grave mistake. Finally, Marlon and Veda spoke. Their voices, usually soft and avoiding conflict, were firm. They expressed disappointment, not in me, but in him, for his actions, his dishonesty, and the way he had exploited their trust. For the first time, Cade felt the weight of accountability in front of the family he had tried to manipulate. It was a turning point. The balance had shifted, Cade's attempts to dominate or intimidate no longer succeeded. Silence replaced his gaslighting, and a clear message was established: deceit would no longer go unchecked. The family, long blind to his schemes, now had clarity, and I had finally reclaimed my voice in a home that had once felt hostile. With Cade's deception fully exposed, I moved to secure what was rightfully protected. I worked with Clara to gain temporary oversight of the family trust, ensuring that Cade could no longer access funds or make decisions until he addressed the damage he had caused. Every account, every asset, was now monitored with precision, leaving no room for manipulation. I didn't seek to embarrass him in front of friends or extended family. Public shame was unnecessary, the real impact was far more potent in private, where control had quietly shifted. Cade, who had always thrived on authority and appearances, now faced a reality he could not dominate. The knowledge that he was constrained, that every action would be scrutinized, was a punishment far deeper than ridicule could ever reach. While overseeing the accounts, I maintained calm composure. My satisfaction was not loud or vengeful, it was deliberate, measured, and silent. Each corrective step I implemented was a reminder that recklessness had consequences and that manipulation no longer held power over the household. Emotionally, the experience reshaped me. The thrill of control and justice replaced the fear and anger that had once clouded my thoughts. I recognized that revenge did not need spectacle. Sometimes the quiet, precise reclaiming of authority carries a weight far heavier than confrontation. By the time the week ended, Cade's usual arrogance had diminished. He was forced to reckon with the consequences of his choices, and the imbalance that had long existed was finally corrected. I hadn't raised my voice, shouted, or humiliated him. Yet, the internal shift in power was unmistakable, a silent, devastating realignment that reinforced one truth: integrity, patience, and strategy could triumph over deceit without ever needing to raise a hand. After regaining control, I knew restoring balance required more than financial oversight, it demanded clear boundaries. I made it known that Cade could no longer assume privileges simply because he was family. Trust would have to be earned through consistent honesty and accountability, not inherited entitlement. Every decision, from handling shared responsibilities to participating in family events, was now guided by rules he could not ignore. Simultaneously, I began redefining my relationship with Marlon and Veda. I approached them calmly, discussing fairness and transparency instead of blame. Conversations focused on mutual respect and shared responsibility, emphasizing how honesty could rebuild confidence in one another. Slowly, they began to see me not as the child who needed protection, but as an equal partner in maintaining the family's well-being. Setting these boundaries required courage. There were moments when old habits and expectations tried to creep back in, subtle pressures from Cade or even unintentional parental leniency. Each time, I reminded myself that independence meant holding firm, that respect could not coexist with unchecked manipulation. Through this process, I noticed personal changes. I was no longer reactive or hesitant. I approached conflicts with calm logic, analyzing situations before responding. Decisions felt deliberate, grounded in principles rather than emotions. Confidence replaced insecurity, and the fear that once accompanied family interactions began to fade. By the time routine stabilized, I had become stronger, wiser, and fully independent within my family circle. Cade still existed in the house, but his influence was diminished, contained by the rules I had established. My parents began relying on me as a voice of reason, and the household moved toward balance. The lesson was clear: boundaries were not just rules, they were shields, tools, and symbols of personal growth. Weeks after implementing boundaries, the family finally reached a turning point. Cade, confronted with the undeniable truth of his actions, had no choice but to offer a formal apology. He acknowledged the mismanagement of funds, the lies he had told, and the trust he had broken. Along with his apology came restitution, steps to repay the resources he had mishandled and to correct the errors he had caused. The change in him wasn't dramatic or theatrical, but the impact was undeniable. The atmosphere in the house shifted, lighter now, filled with cautious relief rather than tension. I realized that strength didn't always announce itself with force or drama. Sometimes, it worked quietly, persistently, and with clarity of purpose. Through it all, my relationship with my parents grew stronger. Their respect for me deepened, not because I had won an argument or humiliated Cade, but because I had shown patience, strategy, and unwavering integrity. I had navigated betrayal and manipulation without losing sight of what was fair or right. Emotionally, the experience brought closure. I didn't feel triumph in vengeance or pleasure in humiliation. Satisfaction came from seeing accountability take its proper course, from knowing that justice had been restored and that honesty and determination had prevailed. The relief of having the family functioning with honesty, and of having regained my own confidence, carried far more weight than any fleeting sense of revenge could have offered. In the quiet moments afterward, I felt a sense of calm settle over the household. Peace wasn't about erasing the past, it was about ensuring that fairness and integrity guided the future. The family had endured a trial, and through careful action and measured resolve, balance had finally been restored. With the family finally stable, I began focusing on my own path. I launched a small consulting business, pouring energy into work that mattered to me and allowed me to create independence on my terms. Each project, each client, became a reminder that I was capable of building something lasting without relying on inherited privilege or approval. Alongside my career, I nurtured relationships that offered genuine support. Friends who shared values of honesty and loyalty became my chosen family, people I could count on, celebrate with, and lean on when challenges arose. Their presence reminded me that connection wasn't solely defined by blood, but by trust, respect, and shared integrity. Cade, after months of accountability and restitution, eventually moved out to begin a new chapter elsewhere. Though physically absent, he remained responsible for the actions he had taken, a reminder that consequences followed choices. The power dynamics had shifted permanently, and the household no longer revolved around fear or manipulation. My parents, quietly observing the transformation, expressed admiration in subtle ways, words of encouragement, moments of trust, and acknowledgement of my guidance. Their respect reinforced what I had learned through trial, that true belonging emerges from fairness and mutual regard, not just familial ties. Living in this new balance, I felt a profound sense of freedom. The past, with all its betrayals and challenges, no longer dictated my daily life. Instead, every decision I made was rooted in clarity, confidence, and integrity. I had reclaimed authority over my world, and in doing so, discovered that self-respect and carefully chosen connections are the foundations of lasting fulfillment. The journey had been painful, but it had taught me that strength, patience, and moral courage can transform hardship into opportunity, and betrayal into a pathway toward independence and peace.